Good morning and welcome to the City of Phoenix Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee. I will call the meeting to order. We have no call to the public today, so I would entertain a motion for the minutes of the meeting, last meeting.
I move approval of the minutes.
Second. And do I have thank you. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Please say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Item 2 is for information only unless there are some questions from members. Hearing none, we will go to item 3. And for item 3, we have Assistant City Manager Lori Bays.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. We are here to discuss with you an update on our staffing and recruiting efforts in the police department. And we've been having this conversation over a period of multiple months. And today we have Executive Assistant Chief Mike Kurtenbach, and Assistant Chief Brian Chapman here to update you on our recruiting efforts.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. As the Assistant City Manager said, I'm Mike Kurtenbach. With me here today is Assistant Chief Brian Chapman. We'll both be providing you information on our staffing efforts. And we're going to go into great detail today. We hope that you'll find this to be very informative. So to kick us off, I'm going to turn it over to Assistant Chief Chapman.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, my name is Brian Chapman. I am the Assistant Chief over our Organizational Development and Community Engagement Bureau. And I'm here today to provide some information on hiring statistics, recruiting, potential fast track program, and our applicant testing and polygraph process. The first slide that you're looking at is a review of our hiring efforts from 2018 through 2021. You can see that in 2018 and 2019 were fairly robust and common for us in the recruiting and hiring efforts. But in 2020 and 2021, there was a drastic decline, in large part due to COVID-19 and some national trends going on with law enforcement agencies across the country. This provided the Phoenix Police Department a great opportunity to review our processes, look at our procedures, and see what we can do to innovate and move that needle forward for 2022.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question to that last slide? Unless you want me to wait till the end.
No, that's fine, Councilman Murray. Go ahead.
So obviously it's a shocking drop off between really 2019 and 2021, but it was a pretty dramatic drop off between 2019 and 2020. And I understood your comments about the national climate affecting things. But I'm more curious about how COVID impacted it, because I would assume a lot of like the application forms and everything would have already been online, that a lot of this already would have been done remotely, except, interviews and so forth. So how much of that could really have accounted for this drop off? Because when I look at that, I think it's the national trend, but maybe there are some specific things you can point out about COVID that affected hiring. I mean, people still needed jobs. There were still the same number of people there would have been otherwise who are young and needed jobs. So I just want to delve in that just a little bit further.
Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, we saw the drastic drop off in part because our recruiting efforts virtually stopped. We were no longer to do community events, in-person hiring events at community colleges. All of our recruiting efforts were transitioned to virtual, and we were innovative with that and really upping our social media efforts. So to answer your question directly, you're correct in that the process doesn't stop in terms of applying. I would say that our recruiting efforts were significantly hampered based on our inability to communicate and reach people directly.
Madam Chair, I'd like to ask a follow-up then. So we're looking for answers to how to get that number 66 back up to 300. I think that's really, if that's not what we're doing here, then we're wasting our time. So it sounds like you're saying we do the social, and I find that, frankly, I go out and knock on doors for my campaigns. That I found is I can I can look at a map of precincts and I can see the ones where I knocked on the doors and I do dramatically better than the ones that are gated or something I can't get to. You can do all the social media and stuff you want, but there really isn't a lot of evidence that that moves the needle unless you're running for president and have millions of followers and stuff, different story, but that isn't this. So I think what I'm hearing you say is we can do that stuff, but that is a supplement to the neighborhood face-to-face, reach out and actually touch someone and convince them being a police officer is for them, that was working. You lost that in 2020, plus the national trends. So my real question is, are we back to the full boat, what we were doing before that used to work? Or are we still sort of in this semi-quasi COVID, we're not doing as much of that as we used to phase? And I hope that's not the answer.
Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, that is not the answer. As I go on in my presentation and talk about our updated recruiting efforts, some of that may speak to the questions and concerns that you have.
Okay, so, but so you're going to talk more in the rest of the presentation about how important the activities we were engaged in before were and how we've gotten back to them. Is that what I'm hearing?
Councilwoman O'Brien, Madam Chair and Councilman Waring, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. I'll shut up now. Thank you.
So the next slide is just a reminder for everybody that Arizona Post is the agency that certifies peace officers in the state of Arizona. Our minimum standards mirror the standards that Post sets for all peace officers in the state of Arizona. These are the minimum requirements to be a police officer in the city of Phoenix. Citizen, 21 years of age, GED or above, submit to a background investigation, medical exam, have no felony convictions, not dishonorably discharged from the military, not used, sold, or transported drugs, not used marijuana in the last 2 years, not used dangerous drugs or narcotics in the last 7 years, not abused prescription drugs, and then submit to a polygraph examination. In December, specifically speaking to recruiting, in December of 2021, the recruitment unit was transitioned from our Employment Services Bureau and seated down at the Phoenix Regional Police Academy. At the time that it remained in Employment Services, we only had 2 recruiters working in that bureau. Once that bureau was moved to the academy, we were able to identify and recruit a new sergeant. And through some restructuring efforts down at the academy, we were able to reallocate 3 additional personnel. So we now have a full complement of a recruiting sergeant and a team of 5 recruiters that are engaged in recruiting efforts. Furthermore, in January of this year, the recruitment unit was tasked with applicant testing. Previously, that rested with the Employment Services Bureau. So we wanted to make a distinction that our recruiters were going to be the first line of and the face when our applicants come into this organization. And we wanted our employment services detectives and staff to focus just on processing background investigations and interviewing applicants. We were able to successfully get those programs separated, and they are up and running currently. Some of the new things that we have done since we have established this recruitment unit is that we have focused our efforts in community-focused recruiting. And what that means, I'm sorry, I'll go into a little bit more of these as we go. Test prep sessions, success with effort and training, pre-test engagement and outreach efforts, in-person information sessions, and community college and educational institution events. Specifically speaking about community-focused recruiting, we have had a cadet program in our police department for 51 years. Historically, we have done a very good job reaching and impacting youth in high school through our SRO programs and some of our other programs that attract youth. Unfortunately, when they graduate from high school, there is a drop-off of opportunities for them within the police department, because in order to start the police academy as a sworn officer, you have to be 20 and a half years old. So what we have done and what we have started to implement is specific outreach to our high school students, beginning in our cadet program to really reach into the communities and the high schools in Phoenix and provide opportunities for full-time employment, potential education benefits as well for this 18 to 20-year-old demographic. And we have focused our efforts in 4 areas that are outlined there with police assistant, police aide, communications dispatcher, and detention officer. And the idea is that we will be able to, while we are engaged with them through the high school efforts, bring them into employment between the ages of 18 and 20, and then transition them into a full-time career as a sworn officer or staying as a non-sworn staff member within the organization. Our recruitment strategies, we have regularly scheduled study sessions for any applicant who wants to come in and get an overview and test prep of the applicant testing, which happens 2 times a month. This year so far, we've had 4 sessions and 76 participants show up to that study session. We also do success with effort and training called the SWEAT program. This is dedicated towards physical fitness, and anybody from the community can join these sessions. We've had 10 sessions with 51 participants. This allows our recruiters to not only touch base with them on something outside of the academic world, but help prepare them physically for the rigors of the police academy. We also have pre-test engagement and outreach, which is an informational session held at a city library where people can come talk to recruiters and learn about the job. And I would also say, in addition to that, we are calling each applicant who has signed up for the test, making sure that they're aware of the test time and hoping that they transition from not only signing up, but to also showing up for the applicant test. So these recruiting efforts continue with information sessions, partnerships at local gyms, engaging with Citizens Offering Police Support Program, and partnering with college recruiters and community colleges within Phoenix to focus on that potential group of applicants as well. As a reminder of the incentive programs that we currently have going on, City Council approved a hiring incentive of $7,500, which was implemented in 2021. Employee referral incentive of $2,500, implemented the same month. Retention incentive of $7,500 for employees was implemented in January of 2022, and we have 88.7% of our department receive that retention incentive. And then we are currently undergoing a compensation study of all sworn classifications that will be done in the near future. Applicant testing. So far, these numbers are from January of this year. We've had 327 sign up, 167 actually show up. That 50% show up rate is consistent with efforts that we've had in the last 2 years as well. There is for whatever reason, significant drop off between the sign ups and the attendance. We've had 100 applicants pass, 67 have failed, and we have a passing rate of 60% on the applicant test. Forecasting academy classes, I will say that we have seen an uptick in our applicant processing of late. Our 2022 start dates are listed on this slide, and we are anticipating filling upwards of 15 in each of the classes post April 4th. As a reminder of the 71 that we hired last year, if we keep on track with applicant testing as we see here and processing opportunities, we're looking at an average of about 120 hires this year just with new applicants. Part of that has to do with some processing efficiencies that we're doing for applicants. Of note, the City of Phoenix has applicant testing for all new applicants. This is not an Arizona Post standard, so the good news here is we have the ability to look at our process to make sure that we are casting as wide of net as possible with some of our testing applicants. One thing that we are doing effective this month is we are waiving an education requirement for any applicant that has an associate's degree or above. They will go straight to a physical fitness assessment and then straight to the background investigation. The reason we're making that distinction is twofold. One, that process is already in play in other City of Phoenix processes, not in the police department. And two, what we're hoping to get, since there's such a heavy academic load in the academy, that we know that if you have an associate's degree, you have shown a pattern and an ability to understand and be successful with that academic load in a college environment. We think that will transition very well to the academy. In addition to that, we are discussing phasing in a military service waiver for those applicants who have a service mindset and have been honorably discharged from military service. This would be another waiver opportunity so they could go straight to the physical fitness and applicant processing. I want to talk for a second about our lateral recruitment efforts. Lateral applicants are those who are already certified as peace officers, both in the state of Arizona and outside the state of Arizona. For purposes of efficiency, we like to concentrate on laterals within the state of Arizona because everybody has met the same standards and training. One of the challenges we have when we have officers coming from other departments in different states is that their standards may be different, and that will require those applicants to have additional training down at the academy. They don't need to go through the academy again from day one, but we have to get very detailed about what they have had and provide that training for them so that coincides with Arizona Post standards. As you can see, there's not been a lack of interest from lateral recruitment opportunities over the last 4 years. When you look out at the averages, we're hiring a little under 10% of all of those, and there's some reasons for that. We obviously are taking a very stringent look at our lateral applicants. We will not hire anybody that's on the Brady list. We will not offer employment to anybody who's currently under investigation at their agencies. We have to review any previous misconduct or other investigations that are relevant to the job. So it takes a little bit longer to process, but we want to make sure that we're getting the best candidate possible. In regards to attracting lateral applicants to the Phoenix Police Department, the benefit to that is obviously they do not need to go through the 6 months of training at the academy. But for a 2-week update of Phoenix policies at the academy and a modified FTO program, they are immediately impactful to our staffing challenges that we're seeing. So one thing we are talking about is a potential fast track program where we will advertise to sworn peace officers in the state that if they come to the city of Phoenix, they will have the ability to pick their desired precinct, their desired shift. 50% of their previous agency years of service will be counted towards transfers within the organization. So if they were a detective in their agency and they want to get to a detective assignment here, as an example, then we will credit 50% of that time towards our internal practices. In talking with HR, we're discussing utilizing some paid time off accrued from your previous agency service to front load that to make it a more attractive so you're not starting basically at zero. And we will outsource our polygraph for specifically related to pre-employment testing. The last thing I'm going to talk about is our polygraph unit. You can see from the chart 2018 and 2019, we had a lot of polygraphs. In 2020, You see the drop off for reasons that we've already talked about, but importantly, city manager made a decision there in 2020 to forego polygraph testing for civilian applicants. So those applicants previously in, for example, the Communications Bureau had to undergo a polygraph. That has been waived, and we have not done that since 2020. So there has been a steady decline. The Phoenix Police Department operates its own polygraph unit, has one supervisor and 4 polygraph examiners. We have transitioned some of their duties to assist with background investigations due to the drop-off in work that they have in the polygraph unit, and we are also reviewing best practices for polygraph testing and exploring options for improvement within our polygraph unit. That concludes my portion of the presentation. I'll switch it over to Chief Kurtenbach, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Madam Chair, can I ask some questions?
Yes.
Thank you. So first, the chart that I'm looking at, maybe you said it and I missed it. I see the number of polygraphs. I see the percent criminal. What does that mean?
Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, that is, criminal refers to people who underwent polygraphs for criminal purposes. Those aren't employees, but those are suspects in other incidents. So I'm sorry I didn't explain that. And that
I got you. Yeah, maybe you did and I missed it. It sounds like maybe
I
you
did
didn't.
not.
So I was like, okay. I thought maybe that was people were turning down because we somehow asked them about criminal behavior we knew about. It was puzzling. So I did have several questions. The first, and I'm sorry I didn't write down the numbers. I guess I could look it up, but you'll probably know. So about recruitment, you talked about moving, I think, 3 more officers and a new sergeant, but then 3 more officers. Is it possible to use people who aren't officers, professional recruiters? I think that's what companies do. Sometimes we hire recruiting firms for different jobs to try to get people to apply. But we don't, if we're looking for accountants or lawyers, we don't necessarily hire a lawyer to do that. They may be a lawyer, but that's not necessarily a prerequisite. I understand this is I understand why having officers at the job training fairs makes a lot of sense. The picture you showed like, I think 3 or 4 officers. I just wonder if that's redundant, if we could hire people, and it's expensive to put officers out in the street and all the stuff, the training and everything that goes with that, we know that. So would it be easier to use civilians, or we've talked about this at previous meetings, using retired officers? I think equally compelling would be someone like, I did it for 30 years. It was a great career. I put my kids through college. I'm getting a pension. The city treated me well. That's also a compelling story. It doesn't necessarily have to be somebody in uniform. So could you comment on that? Or maybe that's something we're already doing and you just didn't mention it.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, yes, we're exploring everything that you just talked about. I would say, importantly, the City of Phoenix is onboarding someone within their HR talent acquisition to specifically target and recruit sworn officers and applicants from the private sector. In addition to that, we've had discussions with the Assistant City Manager about recruitment efforts targeting, not coming so much from the police department, but having a vendor create some of that. As Chief Kurtenbach will talk about, civilianization, to your point, is exactly where some of these efforts are going to go in the future in terms of supplementing it, because we have the need for sworn officers to be out on the street, and we can utilize other opportunities for these non-sworn positions to do things specifically like recruiting. I think that you will see over the course of the next 8 to 10 months, there will be an evolution of positivity within recruitment and hiring, and some will be attributed to the things that you have identified that we are currently working on, but aren't in a position to discuss in depth at this point.
On page 15, thank you for that. On page 15 of your presentation, the potential fast track program, ability to pick desired precinct and so forth, is there any concern that might have a negative impact on morale of current officers who might have had their eye on, I assume you guys have factored that in, but Maybe you can speak a little more in detail about how that won't impact current officers, because if I had 20 years in and somebody kind of jumped the line in front of me, I'd be kind of furious, and maybe I'd look to laterally transfer somewhere else, and that's obviously counterproductive. So I assume you baked that into the cake already, but maybe if you could comment on that.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, we have been in consultation with PLE on this specific issue. I would say that organizationally, we are in a position right now where we have openings on every shift and in every precinct, and I don't think the expectation is that people from outside the agency are going to be able to bid into a Monday through Thursday with Friday, Saturday, Sunday off day shift. But for people coming from other agencies, we do know that desired precinct is an important factor for them. If they live in a certain area of the valley, they do not want long commutes, and this we think is going to be attractive to them. So we are in consult with PLE on this, and we are engaging them with that process to make sure that we are not alienating our current staff with that.
Thank you. In terms of the lateral recruitments on page, sorry, I'm working backwards, on page 14, you have kind of a hefty number of lateral applicants, and very few actually wind up getting hired. But sort of what I took away, and maybe I was misreading it, the implication of what you were saying is we get a lot of applicants from people who might be sending out tons of applications because they've got an issue where they're working currently. Does that really account for the small number of applicants hired versus the number of packets received?
Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, I would say that what happens when we receive the lateral applicants and we start going through their background process and their employee file, and they may tell us things that their previous employer is not aware of, and or we're not comfortable with bringing them forward. I would say that is a large percentage of most of the applicants, and the reason they're not successful is it has to do with internal issues in their previous or their current agency reflected in misconduct investigations or challenges with their employment.
And it shows how anecdotal evidence can be so wrong, but I've talked to several officers, some of who have risen up to command rank. They were transfers, and the reason they transferred is they started their career in usually another city in the valley, and they wanted to be in Phoenix. They wanted to, work with the biggest agency, and they thought that was. Do we still get that, or is that a thing of the past? Because it seems like we're having more outflow than inflow. But the handful of people that I talked to that had transferred who'd had successful careers in Phoenix, obviously they didn't have the issues that we're talking about here. They wouldn't have gotten hired in the first place. But their goal as a young person or young officer was to get with the city of Phoenix. And for whatever reasons, it hadn't worked out the first time. Are we not seeing that anymore, or?
Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, that I think personally is the biggest draw to work for the city of Phoenix. We are the largest agency in the state, fifth largest city in the United States, and we provide tremendous amount of opportunities for people who want to make policing a profession. To your point, that's what we want to emphasize, and we have had a number of our officers lateral to other agencies. I don't have the hard numbers for you right now, but we have seen some of those officers return back to the city of Phoenix because the grass isn't always greener on the other side, as we say, and I think that we will continue to see that sort of reaction from not only maybe people who have left our organization, but people who are going to onboard, and we're going to aggressively pursue those applicants over the course of the next year.
I would have thought, maybe before seeing this chart, just having those conversations, I would have thought laterals would be a good opportunity for us. Maybe it was a pay issue or something, and something we could address. But it sounds like, that looking at these numbers, that's not going to solve our problem. I mean, we need to get new faces who have never been police officers before. It's like the NFL draft. You can do what the Rams did and hire some free agents, but usually you got to go draft some good players, and that's really what we need to do. Not expect to get people from other agencies they're going to be to our quality. We'll get a few, but not many. That's what I'm taking away from this, unless you tell me I'm wrong. So,
Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, I would say that the 10% hiring average that you see within our lateral also is reflective of what we see in applicant pool as well. About 10% of the people who apply for the organization get hired. I can't really say as to necessarily why those numbers correlate, but they are similar. And I do think going forward, we do have opportunities to improve our staffing challenges with the lateral hires. We just have to be very strategic about it and make sure that we are onboarding people that meet our standards and can exceed our expectations.
thank you. On page 13, the testing numbers, obviously it might bear looking into, why did so many people sign up and then so few people attended? So I think you're probably already looking at that. The passed versus failed, is that passing rate, is that congruent with previous passing rates? Like, is that sort of a ballpark to the historical average, or are people failing the test in greater numbers, which might speak to some of the quality of the applicants? Or did the people more likely to pass the test, are they part of the 49% who signed up but then decided not to? And how do we get those people to actually get in the door to pass the test? I'm not sure you'd have answers right this second for that, but those might be questions I'd be asking myself were I in your shoes.
Yes, Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, we have looked at this from a data standpoint, and what we have noticed is that our applicant testing process is conducted by a third-party vendor. The benefit to that is it can be done anywhere in the United States. You don't have to be in the city of Phoenix to take that. The challenge with it is a little more difficult for people to pass. And we have seen a steady decrease of that passing score over the last year. Interestingly, though, when we have taken a dive into people who are successful in our hiring process, there is no correlation between whether you score a 70 on the test or a 95 on the test as to whether or not you're going to get hired and be successful. This is one of the reasons that we are looking at the education waiver and some of these other opportunities, because some of our applicants have been immediately out-processed because they couldn't pass the score, and that's not necessarily reflective of whether or not they're going to be successful in the academy or hiring process. So we are diving into all of these numbers to make sure that we're putting the most seamless process together that can attract the largest pool of applicants that we can process for effective hiring in the organization.
And I think last one, I promise, the 18-year-olds. So obviously you can be a soldier or member of the Air Force or Navy and fight for your country at 18. I definitely understand why that age, limit is there. But you do have people coming out of high school at 18 who would be interested in being a police officer, whose interest may wane over those intervening couple of years. I think you sort of identified that. That might be something we want to look at, because I've met 18-year-olds who are extremely mature, and if they can fight for the country, it seems like they could probably be police officers too. Conversely, you probably wouldn't necessarily want to give every 18-year-old a badge and a gun. That probably would have bad consequences as well. But there are definitely differences for sure. So, but I don't think that 20 and a half, that's not our rule, correct? Or that's something that's statewide. But I do think that the intervening years, you're right to try to find a role for those people so that they're in the pipeline. Because I bet there are a lot of high schoolers who their dream is to be a police officer, and maybe their dream is to be a police officer in Phoenix because they grew up here. They want to be part of the biggest agency, as you talked to before. But then, life happens and, they lose interest or they get a job out of state or something. So I was happy to see this, that maybe get a hook, I guess like fishing, try to get a hook into people and so they don't wriggle away and wind up doing something else. So you can comment on that if you need to, but I appreciated this slide. number 7.
Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, that is one of our big goals here is to start that pipeline off with this age group. And we have successfully had people who have transitioned from police assistant to sworn police officers. And the I guess, beneficial thing for that is that these police assistants are out working in precincts, working in their community, taking lower level calls for service, getting used to the police department policies and procedures, interacting with the community members, handling calls for service. So their transition to the sworn side is fairly seamless and provides a much better candidate for us for the sworn side. So we're very happy with this and expanding this program, and not only for the police assistants, but the police aid, communications dispatcher, and detention officer. It is all about getting the hook into members of our community, high schools in our community, to make sure that we have opportunities for them. We have a good paying job with benefits that's going to provide a career for them, and in some cases, hopefully change the trajectory of their lives through onboarding with the Phoenix Police Department. We look forward to expanding that as much as we can.
I also think, 18 to 22 being a formative age, for sure. I just think, if people have a mission and a job and a place they need to be, they're less likely to get in the kind of trouble. It's not 100%, but less likely to get the kind of trouble that might preclude them from becoming an officer down the road. So there are more eyes on, there's more mentorship outside of the home, however much that's necessary. So I don't see any downside with slide 7. There's only upside, and I think it's well thought out. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll shut up now. I appreciate all the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Waring. Chief Kurtenbach.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. So my part of the presentation, as I'm scrolling forward, is going to focus on numbers.
Chairwoman, I have a couple of questions from
I apologize. Councilman Garcia.
Thank you, and sorry, Chief Kurtenbach, for cutting you off. I'm really interested in this 18 to 20-year-old opportunity. I think there's something there where we can explore even other developments of other sensitivities or other traits that we might be looking for in officers, whether it's other social services. We have the CAP program coming up. So I'd be really interested also knowing that police is not the only department where we're having trouble hiring. So maybe using those 2 years to just recruit folks overall into the city. So I'd love to have more ideas and thoughts on what we can do in those 2 years to not only bring more folks along, but also maybe develop them even further so they'll be even more ready when they're ready to join the force. I had questions on what does failing look like. So we had the numbers on folks failing. Is that failing certain tests, failing drug, polygraph? Is it all? Do we have stats on what exactly folks are failing?
Madam Chair, Councilman Garcia, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but we do have the numbers of where people do not or are not successful in our hiring process. When we talk about that 18 to 20-year-old demographic, and the reason that we want to really outreach to them is I think we can all agree that maybe sometimes life's best decisions aren't made during those 2 years, and that prohibits a lot of people from moving forward in the organization. So we do have the numbers, and I'm happy to report them back to you. I don't have them at this time about what those percentages look like at every step of our hiring process.
Okay. Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to know that, just to know where we could put more efforts or support folks. I think on the marijuana piece, especially now that it's been recreational and it's something like alcohol that's readily available all around us, I think we should go back and look at those 2 years and see if reducing it to a year or actually looking into what the differences may be. might be a 19-year-old, 20-year-old just hanging out with someone, tried it for the first time, and now they can't apply. So I'd be interested in figuring out those restrictions, and if we could be helpful there. The last question I had is, what exactly are military and people with associates skipping? Is it testing or training?
Madam Chair, Councilman Garcia, the education waiver is for anybody who has an associate's degree or above. They don't have to take that initial applicant test that we offer to everybody. And that's what we have started effective this month because as I previously stated, we know that there's heavy academic rigor in the academy, and if they've demonstrated proficiency in that area through evidence of an associate's degree or beyond, we believe that it correlates to them potentially being successful through our academy process. With respect to the military waiver, we have not instituted that. That's one that we are discussing, and we're piloting this program with the education waiver to see if it's successful and it helps with our hiring and applicant processing efforts.
And then last thing, I know we're looking for laterals from obviously the same profession, and it's a lot easier. Is there anything where we're looking at folks in fire, folks in other departments, in parks, park rangers, other folks that might be wanting to do a career shift? Do we do anything in that area?
Madam Chair, Councilman Garcia, those applicants in those other professions would have to start from zero, meaning they would have to start with the applicant process and they would be brought on board and start the academy on day one. I can speak specifically, though, to our reserve division. We have members from the city of Phoenix that work in different areas, fire and parks and others that you've mentioned, that are part of our reserve program that they go through on their own time and they're not compensated for to provide more service to the city. And that is very remarkable, seeing as that that is quite the commitment from them when they're doing a full-time job. But to onboard them to our organization, to the police department, they would have to start kind of at the front of the line with everybody else with regard to training.
Yeah, I wasn't speaking towards them having a lateral advantage or starting in a different place. Just wondering how much we recruit from other areas, other professions. That may make sense. But thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you, Councilman Garcia.
Thank you, Madam
Okay.
Chair. I just want to, Chief Chapman touched upon it, but I just want to clarify one thing that Councilmember Garcia asked about, and that was marijuana. We agree that it is very valuable to have applicants in our department have life experience, and we understand that there are mistakes that happen, certainly in that 18 to 20-year-old age group, and marijuana experimentation being one of those. It shouldn't necessarily preclude employment. I just want to be clear that this isn't a Phoenix PD standard. This is an Arizona Peace Officer and Standard Training Board standard that we must adhere to. And Post has been progressive as of late, understands that there is recreational marijuana, but regardless of what we think when it comes to certain hiring standards, we must adhere to those that are prescribed by Post. I just wanted to clarify that point. With that, I'll go into my presentation. And I'm going to start with numbers and give you an update. This is consistent with the hiring and recruitment monthly report that you received that was in your packet today, and consistent with presentations that Chief Williams and I have given over the past 6 months. So as of February 28th, we're sitting at 2,703 filled sworn positions. Very happy to have 32 police recruits in the academy. That's a number that we haven't seen in quite a while. Really, the bread and butter, the backbone of the department is our patrol staffing. You've heard me say repeatedly that our minimum staffing number is 1,096 working officers. Presently, we're at 1,005 working officers with 20 officers in training. We differentiate those. We pull those out of that 1,005 because they aren't available to be solo-capable officers. And you see, as of this slide, we had 91 officers that are in transitional duty. that means they've suffered different injuries or they're otherwise unavailable, and they don't count toward that overall count of 1096 working available officers. Because we are so far below minimum staffing in patrol, and we look at metrics such as our median response time to our priority one or calls that are happening right now, we're forced to look at every single position on the department. Beginning back in September, Chief Williams gathered the entire command and executive staff, and we looked position by position throughout the organization. And we came to the very hard decision to reallocate approximately 120 officer and sergeant level positions from slots that they worked very hard to attain back to the patrol function. These positions will be reallocated among all 7 precincts based on the statistical workload formula. That is a 7-part formula that is weighted most heavily on citizen-generated calls for service. In other words, we assign them where the work is. All of the affected officers were notified of their transfer back to patrol in person. It was important to us. We owed them that. And we anticipate that those moves will occur in June of this year. The hope is in the first part of June. And we recognize that morale is a significant factor within the organization, and we want to ensure that we give people hope. So with that, and if we continue on the trend that Chief Chapman alluded to, that we are successful in hiring, we hope to return those officers, sergeants, and detectives back to positions they've earned, in doing so by creating a 2-year reinstatement list that will allow them to go back to those positions. Now, that doesn't preclude them from testing for other positions during their time, but we recognize as we get leaner and leaner as a department, there are fewer opportunities, which is why we want to give them the opportunity to return to the positions that they previously earned. Next, I'd like to talk about civilianization. And we're extremely grateful that the council just last Wednesday approved our request for 33 additional civilian positions. As we continue to lose sworn members of the department, it's incumbent upon us to evolve as an agency and evolve as a profession. There are certain things that it doesn't make sense for a uniformed sworn officer to do, and there are other things that we can't continue to do as we have to focus on greater priorities. So of these 33 positions that you just so graciously approved, 25 of them will be police civilian investigator positions that will augment the work that's done by our detectives today. That will allow our detectives to go out into the field to conduct those crime scene investigations, those witness interviews, do all the scene work that they need to do, and then have support back in the office to help with impounding, to help with other evidence, to really support that investigation, to do case management and package that case for criminal prosecution. On the slide in front of you, you see how we will be breaking down those first 25 positions, recognizing that a little over half are going to go to our Property Crimes Bureau because you are more likely to be the victim of a property crime than you are of a violent crime, but then spreading those additional assets out among the other investigative bureaus. Additionally, we are hiring 8 police assistant positions to support the patrol function. These assistants are invaluable because what they will do is they will take non-injury collisions, they will take investigations where there is no longer a suspect present, and they can conduct those initial investigations, complete that investigative report, and will relieve patrol to handle higher priority calls for service. This is what I am so excited to report to you today. We just opened up the portal through Phoenix.gov last Thursday. And as of this morning, when it comes to the police civilian investigator position, we've had 447 applicants for those 25 positions. I think that's going to show that not only is there tremendous interest in working for the Phoenix Police Department, but it's going to afford us the opportunity to get very high quality applicants. And then when it comes to the 8 police assistant positions, we've had 128 applicants as of this morning. So just to recap what we went over today were our hiring statistics, our ever-evolving recruiting efforts, our fast track program to hopefully reach out to laterals and to others to attract them to our department, what we're doing with regard to applicant testing and our polygraph administration, the reallocation that is forthcoming, and our civilianization efforts. This list isn't meant to be all-inclusive. We'll continue to evolve, as I mentioned, as a department and look at ways where we can be more efficient and more effective, the way we can attract talent to the department and we can retain that talent. Other things that we will do, we will continue to come back to you with updates to include Arizona State University's calls for service study to see how we could apply that, perhaps not apply or respond to certain calls, and other things that we can do to improve our response as an agency. That concludes my part of the presentation. Open to answer any questions that you may have.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question?
Yes, Councilman Waring.
Thank you. I guess back to page 19. First, and maybe you said it and I missed it, the 25 police civilian investigator positions, that doesn't mean 25 officers are freed up. That's assistants that do a lot of the work that officers would have had to do otherwise. Is that a fair statement?
Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, that is very much a fair statement. We can't replace the work that our detectives do with a non-sworn. Our non-sworn are very valuable to the organization. But I don't want there to be any illusions that by moving a detective, which we are going to have to do, to patrol or other assignments, and replacing that person with a police civilian investigator, that it's a one-for-one. It's an effort to augment the work they do, to support the detective assignments, but it does not replace.
So, Madam Chair, Chief, we talked about the 18 to 20-year-olds. I have 11-year-olds in my house, and it is humiliating how much better they are on a computer than I am, particularly one of them who's into coding and everything else. But my point with that is, it does seem like, if you grow up with this technology in a way that, Chief, sad to say, we didn't, or certainly not nearly as much, or certainly not the advanced technology that you see now, I think that's a wonderful opportunity to use the 18 to 20-year-olds and get them into police work. I understand why you wouldn't, just sick an 18-year-old out into the world online to try to find human traffickers just unfettered on their own. But with the advice of a sworn officer, is there a way to use such people who really have a talent for computers or really have a talent for getting online? If the detective's like, here's what I'm looking for, go find it. Could we use those people and kind of get them not only into our pipeline, but get them to use skills that a 45-year-old detective might not have, or might have to learn, or we'd have to train them? Is there a way? Because anytime a detective or an officer is sitting at a computer, that's time they're not out on the street, they're not out contacting a perpetrator or what have you. So is there a way to do that? I'm probably not articulating as well as I can, but hopefully you take away what I'm saying. If a detective had 3 such people who were making $40,000 a year each, which would seem like a boatload of money maybe to an 18-year-old, I just think that might be a good way to redistribute the resources, much the way you're talking about with these 25 police civilian investigators. And maybe you've already thought of this, maybe you're already doing it. But does that make sense? Is that something we're doing, or is it possible to do?
Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, you see my uniform and you see all these service stripes that I have. That just means I've been here a long time. But to your point, it doesn't mean that I understand technology. And you're right, we can learn so much from the younger generation. And with the support of Assistant City Manager Bays and City Manager Barton, we're looking at other opportunities to civilianize within the department and plug those young people in. And maybe they want to stay in a non-sworn role, those 18 to 20-year-olds that we're talking about right now, or perhaps that entices them to transition when they reach that 20 and a half to go to the sworn side. But regardless, we're looking at those positions, ways that we can plug them in, ways that we can support the investigations that are being done right now beyond just the patrol police assistance. So yes, we are looking at just that.
And Madam Chair, Chief, part of the reason I think of that, I'm chair of the Human Trafficking Task Force for the city, we hear about your operations, we get updates at the meetings, don't want to give away the store, but a lot of it now is online. It just seems like you wouldn't have to have a sworn officer crafting the fake ad or whatever. It just seems like there's other ways to do that, and then they actually arrest and set up the cases for the county attorney and so forth. I've been thinking about that a lot. Every time we have one of those briefings, I think, wow, I bet that's really a time-intensive thing, before you get to the arrest. This is a way to help, I think, what we're talking about right here. So I just hope you can put the fast forward on that. And if you need something, certainly I'll speak for myself, my office, I try to get this expedited, because I think it kills 2 birds with 1 stone of getting young people into the system, using their expertise, and then potentially getting them either to stay in these roles as you suggested, or become officers themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ansari, do you have anything?
No, thank you. I think the presentations were very thorough. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. Councilman Garcia, anything?
Nothing from me. Thank you.
Wonderful. I too appreciate the information that you brought us, Chief Kurtenbach and Chief Chapman. I am excited that we had such an incredible response to investigator positions and police assistant positions, and look forward to getting updates, and hopefully with the COVID cloud dissipating, our recruiting will also turn around in the same fashion. So thank you both for being here today.
Madam Chair, may I add one comment?
Of course.
Thank you. First, I want to just thank Chief Kurtenbach and Chief Chapman for their work on this. This has been a in-depth, ongoing effort, and I think Chief Chapman's contributions have been really meaningful, and we're making some significant progress in modernizing our recruiting and hiring practice. I also want to thank the council members, some of them on this subcommittee, who've helped us advertise the new civilian positions and have been part of that success. And we're actually going to be asking for some more council support in helping us to recruit for police positions, both sworn and civilian. And we will be providing council members with toolkits, if you will, packets of information that you can utilize within your districts and your constituencies to help share information about the opportunities that are available within the police department and to reach those audiences that we want to reach within each council district. So I just wanted to share that with you all as well.
Thank you so much, Lori. I appreciate that. And as I said earlier in the meeting, we didn't have any call to the public, any future agenda items requests. Okay, hearing none, then we will adjourn the meeting. Have a great day.
The first one is our traditional model, which is a drop-off. If you